if you feel like you've been out of clinical practice for a certain period of time, or you just want to get a feel of the NHS before you actually undertake a job, you might think about doing a clinical attachment. So today we're going to talk about what a clinical attachment is about, how you can get it, and why you should or potentially maybe you don't need to do an attachment. If this is the first time you're checking out our channel, welcome. Basically what we do is we run a website that's totally free known as roadtok.com, and it will explain the ins and outs about everything related to the United Kingdom and what it takes for you to work as a doctor in the NHS. So if you've not already, please stalk us on all of our social media. Find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, Instagram, and of course, YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe. Hi guys, my name's Breeze and I currently work as a doctor in the NHS, and let's talk about clinical attachments. So if you're someone who's like, do you know what, I kind of feel like I need a little bit of something, a little extra to understand the NHS beforehand, you might want to do a clinical attachment. Now, it's not a necessary thing. You don't have to do a clinical attachment, and it's not that a clinical attachment would guarantee you a job or anything in particular. It's just more about getting a little bit of experience or a feel for the NHS before you're actually undertaking your role. So the most ways that people end up getting clinical attachments are they basically just type clinical attachments UK into Google, and then you see a whole bunch of hospitals that have the options available. Maybe they have the application right on their page. We have an article about it that we've linked in the description box below that can give you a little bit more information. But basically, if you just contact the human resources of different hospitals, maybe even a consultant or two, if you know anyone, if they are aware of any sort of clinical attachment program that the hospital is undertaking, and if you can go ahead and apply. Now, when should you apply for a clinical attachment? Most clinical attachments, when you fill up that form, that application, they will say they will need you to at least be GMC registered. There are very few that will be happy if you've at least done PLAB 1 or PLAB 2. Most of them will ask for GMC registration. So ideally, if you plan ahead and you're like, all right, I know I want to do this, you have to come to the United Kingdom anyway to take PLAB 2. So if you put it in a way that, all right, you take your PLAB 2 exam, you got a little bit of buffer for your GMC registration, and then you've got a course or an attachment that you can be doing, hey, there you go, you're set. But plan it accordingly so that you know that you got your time and everything lined up in the right way, so that it doesn't end up being that you're wasting any time that you're spending in the UK. You don't need any separate or special visa. You're already going to be there on a valid visa to take your PLAB 2 exam, and that's fine for you to do your attachment on that visa as well. You don't need to leave the country and come back on a separate visa or a new visa or anything like that at all. It's just a matter of making sure you make your plans ahead of time so that you know what you'll be doing at what time. What about the cost? Will clinical attachments be free? I personally don't know of any that don't charge anything at all. If you get lucky, you might find one. But what I would recommend is do not go to a clinical attachment if they're asking for like a lot of money. Like if it's a couple of £1,000 for you to do just a couple of weeks with them, it's really not worth it. There are a lot of hospitals that will offer clinical attachments between £200 to £500 in a month, rather than paying £2,000 to £4,000 in a month. It's not that one clinical attachment could potentially offer you anything better or more. I don't know why some charge more than others. Maybe it's just demand or popularity. But don't get fixated on the thought that, well, if I'm paying more, they're obviously going to give me something more out of it. That's not necessarily true. Like I said before, doing a clinical attachment doesn't guarantee you a job or give you anything except for that general kind of experience that you can then put on your NHS jobs application that, look, I did this attachment from this time to this time, and this is what I learned, and this is what I did. So fine, yeah, you've got your clinical attachment. Now, what are they going to be expecting you to do? This can really vary from hospital to hospital, especially if they're taking you without GMC registration. But for the most part, you can generally expect to follow the ward rounds, maybe do a little bit of history taking, clerking, basic examination. The likelihood of you being allowed to prescribe or anything further than that may be very low, but again, totally dependent on the hospital. Your role basically is to be there to soak up all of the information that you can about how a hospital works, how that department and speciality works, things about the NHS in regards to referrals, in regards to how specialities communicate and what gets done where. That is what you should be taking out of the attachment entirely. Now, why is it really important that you plan ahead for your attachment? It's important because they're going to be asking for certain documents from you, and you don't want it to be that you're in a situation where you're already in the UK and they're asking for things and you're like, well, how am I supposed to get them now that I'm in the UK and not back home? So again, this may vary, but remember, when you're asking for an attachment in advance, if they're telling you what you need, try and keep them ready. So things like your police clearance certificate, they may need you to do an occupational health, appointment with them. They may ask for a valid IELTS or OET. Totally dependent on those hospitals, but whatever documentation they ask for, at least if you ask in ahead of time, if you plan and book your attachments maybe a couple of months before you're actually there, you're going to be able to keep all those documents and all those paperworks ready. So you're not kind of surprised that, oh, well, I just thought I could come and do this attachment. Why didn't you know all these things about me? I mean, I'm obviously here already. Just let me do the attachment. So no, don't think that's what can happen. Plan ahead. Know how you're spending. You're going to be in the UK on a 6-month visa. Know what you're going to be doing for those 6 months and plan it out accordingly so you're not stuck in a situation where you could have done an attachment, but because you didn't plan ahead, it didn't work out for you. The last little bits of all of this, now you're going to be wondering, all right, fine. I've got the attachment, submitted all the documents, they're happy, they're going to take me from this date to this date in this hospital, but where am I going to stay? If the hospital has hospital accommodation and they have availability for you, you can stay in the hospital accommodation. You will have to pay for the hospital accommodation, of course. But if they don't, you're going to have to find a place nearby to stay like you would have for any other form of accommodation when you were there for PLAB 2 or, any other part of your stay in the UK. So you'll have to factor that into your costs as well. And of course, you're not going to be paid during your attachment. You are paying them basically for this experience. So remember that for the period of time that you will be doing the attachment, you will be staying in a place that you have to pay for, and you're paying them for the attachment as well. So if you're thinking about your finances, really know how much money is going into all of this before you commit to the idea. Again, I want to make it really clear, you don't have to do a clinical attachment if you feel like it's not necessary for you. You can always ask when you're starting out in your first job in the NHS for a period of shadowing. A shadowing period and a clinical attachment are totally different because see, when you're shadowing, you're already hired, you're working for that hospital, you're getting paid to follow people around and see what you're doing. You've got your full registration, you're going to be allowed to do all the things that everyone else is doing, but they're just making sure you're settling in and adjusting to your new environment. The clinical attachment, you're not really working for them in that sense. You've not got a contract, you've not been hired by them. You're just there as a observer, all right? So don't get the two things confused and mixed up. If you think, no, I feel like I have a pretty decent understanding of what my needs and my expectations are, and I'm happy to ask when I start my first job for a period of shadowing where I can be a supernumerary individual, by all means do that. Don't think you have to do a clinical attachment. But if you do want to, it's really important that you plan everything ahead of time and know what you need to submit and think about your finances as well, because it's not something that you should just wake up one day and decide, I want to do an attachment tomorrow. And there you have it. Clinical attachments and how you can go about getting them done. If you're still confused or you need a little bit more information, you can always book a personalized guidance session with us. But until next time, guys, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you soon.